So welcome to explAInED. On today's episode, we have a very special guest, Leon Furze, and we start every episode, Leon, with the same question. We ask everybody, what does AI mean to you? And tell us a little bit about your journey to that point.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, isn't it? Because it means everything and nothing. So to me, it's a bit of a catch-all phrase for a technology which has been around for a long time, but which we're only really now talking about in terms like generative AI in schools. And I think it's a term that's got its own kind of mysticism and mythology associated with it, this kind of magical thinking that comes from technology companies. So I like to talk about these things as applications and products and services, and avoid using the term AI as much as possible, because I think that it's great marketing, but it's really confusing. As for how I got here, so I'm an English teacher by trade. I did my teacher training in the UK and then moved over to Australia in 2009, and then taught in secondary schools for 15 years. Mostly in English, literature, media, drama, but also a little bit of digital technologies and STEM. And I've always liked computing and programming and the intersection of writing and technology. So in 2022, I started a PhD in digital writing. And mid-22, I thought, okay, I'll explore these automated writing technologies that are just on the horizon. They're probably going to get big over the next 3 to 5 years. And then in November, ChatGPT came out just 2 weeks after I'd officially started the PhD, and sort of blew everything up. So it all escalated very quickly from that point.
So Australia put out a framework for generative AI, and we were curious. So to us, when we saw that, we all latched onto it. It was of what we thought was very well done, and far ahead from where we are as a nation or our state. How is that being received and utilized there?
So the Australian framework for Gen AI in schools it came out really quickly. And I know, comparing to other countries' responses, it was very fast. It took 9 months to come together, and there was it was a cross-sectoral effort. So we have the states, the Catholic and the independent schools involved, each state and territory. And then it was published at a federal level. So that was great. It was great that it all came together so quickly. There was a lot of consultation, which was really useful, with higher education, secondary, and industry. It was released at the end of 2023 and then open for review in 2024. I think that the only issue with it really has been that it hasn't been resourced very well so far. So it was published. Some people read it. Some schools that I work with still haven't even heard of it. And each individual state and territory is responsible for resourcing it in its own way. So, Queensland over here, they're doing a great job putting some resources, webinars and things together, and they've got a website. Their curriculum authority, QCAA, has a website where they have resources. But where I'm based in Victoria, we've got nothing, and some of the states are the same. So they're really great to see that it came out quickly, but problematic that it then hasn't really done anything since.
Yeah, and I think we have a different but similar experience in the United States. Typically, we're a country of states' rights, and so many states in our country have put out their own guidance, Vermont not being one of them yet. But today we learned that 60 AI organizations have signed a pledge with our White House for AI in education, and broadly are saying they're going to provide resources, training, mentorship, professional development for teachers. What risks do you think we run by approaching it, there first before having a framework in place.
Yeah, so I've been watching what's happening over on your side of the world with interest. And I mean, the technology companies getting a free pass to do what they like in the education system brings some serious alarm bells. We know that they're already dug pretty deep into education globally. Over here in Australia, you're a Microsoft school or you're a Google school. Very, very few in between, a few schools that are a little bit of both, but very few that are neither. And so to give a license to the technology companies to say, okay, well, we'll take over, we'll do the job from here, I think it risks undermining the professionalism of teachers, which is something that's already pretty precarious at the moment. I know that in the US, just like over here in Australia, there's a teacher shortage, attrition rates are really high, and there are a lot of problems in the sector, which I don't think the technology is going to solve. I think that maybe the technology companies might try to solve those problems with the technology in the same way that, everything looks like a nail to a hammer. But I don't think it will really solve the root causes.
Well, and the, I worry about the companies putting stuff out there because they don't necessarily know what's good in education, but they all have their own motive for doing it. So that's a big concern for me. And, they'll have their own built-in bias or direction where they try to steer their users. So I worry about that. And I read your recent post about digital plastic. I was hoping I could ask you just to briefly explain that for people who haven't read it. And I have a kind of follow-up question on it when you're done too.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm an English teacher at heart, and I love a good metaphor. And I think that the whole language around artificial intelligence is rife with metaphor. So, just that term itself, artificial intelligence, is a bit of a misnomer and a bit of a myth. But I think we can use metaphors to sort of reclaim and steer the narrative around the technology as well. So back in early 2023, I sort of floated this idea of AI as digital plastic, so synthetic media, very much like real world synthetics, where they're potentially helpful. If we think about plastic and medical applications and prostheses and all of the great things that have happened with plastics in the real world, but also compare that to the environmental harms and the cost and some of the industry around plastic, and then to apply that logic to synthetic media and to think, okay, so what does it look like if generative AI content, is that going to fill the online ecosystem with this sort of floating junk? And we're already seeing a lot of that. We're seeing social media filled with AI junk. We're seeing slop and AI generated images filling social media and places like YouTube and all of those channels. So I think that metaphor of digital plastic works on a few levels. It works on that comparison to physical plastics, but also really speaks to the way that it can be helpful and harmful in that online ecosystem.
Yeah, I love that metaphor because it's such a clear way to think about it. And I also made me think about how, as far as like literal plastics, that for companies, they like Coke or whatever, they basically put the onus on like their users to fix it. So the problem was ours to solve. And I feel like, I don't know where it's going to go with the Gen AI companies, but do you think it's kind of like that? Like they enable like mass production of slop or, bad digital plastic, and then we have to be the ones to sort through it.
Yeah. I think devolving responsibility down to the end user is the goal of every major company in any industry. And if you think about the what's happening at the moment with things like deepfakes and synthetic media. There's that conglomerate of companies started by Adobe, OpenAI is involved, Microsoft, Google, that are following the content credentialing initiative, which is a great initiative to watermark or digitally label synthetic media. And, many listeners would probably have seen the little CR logo appearing even in LinkedIn. If somebody shares an image generated in ChatGPT, it applies this little watermark logo to it. And so that's a little bit like companies who manufacture plastics labeling different types of plastic that they use in their products and steering the user towards, how to recycle them at your local recycling depot. But we know that, individuals recycling is important, but doesn't really shift the dial on the pollution that comes from the industry. It just pushes it downstream. And I think in a similar way with the content credentialing, it makes it possible for an individual user to say, hey, I've used synthetic media and this is what I used. But it doesn't do anything to change regulation around, when we can or can't use it. It doesn't do anything to regulate the companies to say, oh, hey, maybe you shouldn't release open source technologies that can be used to create really compelling deepfake videos and just throw that out into the wild with no accountability. So it really does the same thing, Shaun, as you said. It just pushes downstream to the user all of that responsibility.
Yeah, and
because of that, can I just ask?
Yeah, of course.
I think because we don't have control over what these companies are doing, it becomes then very important for us to learn about trying to mitigate some of this damage. And so you have a series on teaching AI ethics, everything from these environmental concerns to bias to data privacy. What are the practical ways that schools can contribute to this ethical dialogue?
I think, dialogue's the key word there, isn't it? What we do in schools is we talk and we teach and we have, hopefully, difficult conversations with students. I think a lot of those conversations happen outside of the approved or the authorized curriculum sometimes, but it's educators talking to students about some of these problematic areas of AI. And this is, for me, some of the problems with the AI literacy ideas, particularly the way that's been promoted in the States and being driven by the technology companies, is they often pay lip service to these issues. So if you look at materials published by Microsoft and Google, they've both got courses online that talk about AI, and they do mention bias, but it's a paragraph. It's, oh yeah, these systems can potentially be biased, and the best way to avoid that is to try to debias them in your prompt. So if you want it from the perspective of a woman or a black person, or so, you have to type that in yourself. We're not going to do anything to the data set because we've already gathered all the data. We're not going to disgorge those data sets. So deal with the problem downstream again. And when I started that Teaching AI Ethics series in 2023, because that was what I was reading a lot about. And I was really struck by Kate Crawford's book, Atlas of AI. And she frames, again, through an extended metaphor, she frames the AI industry as the mining industry. It's a very extractive industry. And I thought this is the kind of thing that schools need to be talking about. Like, we don't need to be teaching students how to use ChatGPT. They'll learn how to do that from TikTok videos. We need to be teaching them how to have really deep and tricky conversations about, okay, so what does it mean that this technology, has extracted data or intellectual property from this community of artists? What does it mean for the future of music? What does it, these kinds of questions.
That's amazing. That's really. I was recently asked about forming a student club, and I was struggling around what is the purpose of that. Like you said, they're going to learn how to use it on their own. That shouldn't be the purpose. It's to ask those deep questions and keep asking harder questions. That's amazing. I wanted to ask you about your AI assessment scale. And first, have you kind of introduce that for folks that may not know what that is, but also talk about any lessons that you've learned through the use of that. And as time has gone, what would you recommend for folks that are just entertaining that now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the AI assessment scale's been incredibly well received globally, and I think a lot of that was being in the right place at the right time. So early 2023, I had a conversation with some teaching and learning staff at a university in Perth, and we said we need something more than just that binary use it or don't use it approach. There's got to be some nuance, maybe like use it here but not here. And so we tried this idea of this 5-point scale, and I published a blog post that was read by Mike Perkins at British University Vietnam, and Mike and Jasper Rowe at James Cook Singapore. He's at Durham University now in the UK. They got in touch and said, shall we adapt this for university sector? We did that. We published the first version. And then over time, we worked with a lot of educators and a lot of students. We found that the technology had already sort of, the genie was out of the bottle or the cat was out of the bag, or whichever metaphor you want to use now. And that we couldn't say to students, well, just use it for this and then please stop and don't use any more AI. We have to be really clear about redesigning assessment tasks that say to a student, okay, in this task, in this particular discrete unit of work, we're going to use AI for research because it's effective, and we're going to teach you how to do that, and we're going to teach you which applications work best and the strengths and the limitations. And then for this type of activity, we're going to use no AI. And the reason for that is it's not a good use of the technology, or it's not a good use of your brain. And we'll do that under tech-free conditions, not necessarily exam conditions, which is important. Discussions, debates, practical tasks, they're all great AI-free activities. And so now the way we use the assessment scale is sort of like an assessment design tool to balance the use and the avoidance of AI through a program of study. So we might say, okay, across a program of study, we'll have 3, 4, half a dozen tasks, formative, summative, some of them formally assessed, some of them informally assessed. And there'll be at different levels of the scale throughout the unit to acknowledge that there are strengths and limitations to using the technology in different contexts.
I've got a question about that.
Yeah.
I hate to be a pessimistic question, but it kind of is.
Mm-hmm.
So I've heard from educators in my school. I brought up frameworks of assessment scales, and the feedback I was kind of getting was, well, we don't want AI for anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of gets me stuck. I'm a digital learning leader, so I'm trying to integrate technology. So
yeah,
what would your advice be to kind of jumpstart that conversation again, away from, and not just saying, well, we have to get on board with AI because it's the future, and I'm not all about that narrative, but just maybe some practical ways that we could get educators more on board with being willing to experiment with these things with students.
Yeah, I agree, first of all, that I don't like the, AI is here to stay or it's not going anywhere kind of narrative. So I wrote an article a few weeks ago called the Myth of Inevitable AI. And I think it's ubiquitous, but it's not inevitable. And we've got to be clear about the distinction between the two, because inevitable suggests that OpenAI have already written the playbook and that we're just going to follow it from here on in. Whereas ubiquitous suggests to me that it's, it is everywhere. It's on kids' phones, it's on their laptops, it's on their Ray-Bans. It's, they're bringing it into class in all kinds of ways. So it is almost, we're past the point now of kind of controlling it or banning it or locking it down. And so there's an imperative there to get used to it. But I think the more important thing, and the approach that I take, is to work in faculty groups. And I think that what we need to really value is disciplinary expertise from the teaching staff. So we've got to take a group of experts in the humanities, or expert English teachers, or expert mathematics teachers, and we've got to sit them down with someone who knows how the technology works and who can demonstrate different kind of aspects of the technology to see what they can come up with. And so, an example of this would be ChatGPT, when it was first released, was absolutely hopeless at mathematics because it's just predictive text, and you can't complete mathematics equations or do sums by trying to guess the next word. But in the last 3 years, they've improved the mathematical reasoning. They've changed the way that it processes information so that it can approach tasks more logically. And if all else fails, it can use a programming language like Python to do really complex data analytics. So 2022, ChatGPT, hopeless at maths. 2025 can be really, really effective at doing tasks in a mathematics or a science context. But the staff need to be able to see that for themselves. Otherwise, there's just this knee-jerk reaction that it's a cheating tool. It's the thing that kids use to cheat. I don't want it in my classroom. I'm going to go back to blue books. I'm going to go back to exams. I'm going to throw away all the laptops. So, I think providing the time and the space for teachers within faculties, within disciplines of expertise, to sit with the technology and to see what it can really do, and not rely on, vague memories of what it could do 3 years ago, or supposition about what the students are using it for. That obviously takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And I think at the moment, a lot of conversations around AI literacy are trying to shortcut that by just providing, handy little pamphlets and infographics that say, well, this is what AI can do, now go away and do it. But there's no substitute for time and effort, really.
Right. Like all the 18 ways you can use AI in the classroom posts, or those kind of things. 6 ways you can use for that. Yeah. Right. No, good point. But along those lines, sometimes a teacher who is a little wary of technology, whether it's AI or not, they get convinced because they find a way that it really helps a particular student. So I know you've written about assistive technology, and I was just wondering if there's any application of Gen AI for assistive technology that really sticks out for you.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of text to speech and speech to text technologies, which obviously predate ChatGPT, but have recently improved a lot because of large language model integrations. So OpenAI's Whisper model, which is their audio transcription model, is incredibly accurate, much more accurate than speech to text 3 or 4 years ago. And I personally use it a lot as an assistive technology, essentially. So I use it for documenting my thoughts, for recording articles, for getting tasks out of my brain and into a device, other than just sort of not doing it and having 400 balls in the air at the same time. And I've heard a lot from the autistic ADHD community about using the technology as an organizational tool. I've spoken to dyslexic students in higher education who've had great use of artificial intelligence and those kinds of text to speech. And then in that article that you mentioned, I explored technologies like Be My Eyes, which is a company that allows users to connect to a real person, but also now to a GPT-4 based image recognition model. And if you're a blind user, you can get your phone or a pair of Ray-Bans glasses. I've got a prop. There we go. So you can pop them on and it will connect to the little cameras. We don't have to use Meta's Ray-Bans. I think I would prefer not to, generally, given their atrocious privacy policies. But any augmented reality glasses connect to an image recognition model and get a real-time description. I've actually, I've got a conversation lined up in August with the CEO of Be My Eyes. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation to work more around the positive uses of these technologies, because I think they can be potentially great for a lot of people.
Leon, can I ask you, we are all, just fascinated by the people that we get to talk to and how their brains work. And I think I'm recognizing that with you, it's kind of a similar journey that we've been on, where we just have a ton of questions and we just start asking them. But how are you, the pace of all of this is just extreme. So how are you, you talked a little bit about how you're using different AI tools to get your ideas and thoughts out, but have you found that you have found a way to get to ideas and thoughts that you otherwise wouldn't have with, like a notebook or a traditional method of journaling or whatever it is? Have you found an accelerated pace that also provides you that balance to kind of keep pace with everything that's going on?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm always on the go. I've got lots of different ideas, but I find that reading and writing is my shtick. And I just noticed yesterday I've just published my 303rd blog post. So a lot of the way that I get my ideas out there is to just write them down, post it, and see what happens. And if people respond well to it, it might turn into a series like the Teaching AI Ethics series did. I am a sort of near obsessive journaler, and I say journal because it's a slightly more I don't know, maybe a more masculine word than diary. Not that I'm particularly masculine with my. This is an audio format, so it won't translate. I'll describe it for the listeners, but this is a little moleskin diary that I've got in my hand here with a pink rabbit on the front of it. I think it was the year of the rabbit limited edition. So these every day writing and journaling and those ideas will transfer out of here into the blog at some point probably. But just recently I started this is old school tech. Renee, you'll probably like this as well, but I started an RSS feed on my website of all of the things that I've been reading. Because I do read a lot of different articles, different industries, and I like to use that to pull ideas together for what's in education. So on my website at leonfurze.com/AI-reads, there's an ongoing RSS feed now, which is just all of the interesting articles that I'm coming across. And I just think you got to read widely, you've got to write lots, or I do, and talking conversations like this, all of that helps to solidify those ideas.
That's incredible.
I have to tell you, Leon, doing my research on you, I was like, he's posted another post. I was like, I've already read my questions.
I had a lull at the beginning of this year where I think I only wrote sort of 3 or 4 posts in the first couple of months of this year because I was writing my the draft of my PhD thesis at the time. It sort of sucked all of the writing life out of me. But I'm back up to maybe 2 or 3 posts a week now, which is my usual kind of rhythm.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's amazing. We're all in awe and appreciative of your time. I know it's probably time for you to get breakfast,
more coffee,
dinner, more coffee. Yeah.
I mean, you're in tomorrow for us.
I am in the future. Yeah. This is why I work in the industry.
Yeah. Can you look up the Powerball numbers for me?
I'm not sure if that sounds correct. I mean, I'm always confused by time zones, but that sounds like
That's what I said. No, Leon, thank you very, very much. This has been fantastic. We appreciate every moment of it. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
thank you very much.
We'd love to talk to you again sometime because I'm sure we have a million other questions we could ask you.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Yeah.
Thank you.